guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Jackie. I am a pediatric nurse in Southern California. Before doing pediatrics, I was a hospice nurse for about 5 years. My experience as a hospice nurse was a good one. It was super rewarding. I got to know my patients and their families in such a vulnerable stage in their lives. I feel that was the most rewarding part of being a hospice nurse. I actually do still keep in contact with some of their family members, even though some of my patients have passed away. What is hospice? Hospice is usually care that is for end of life. To be eligible for hospice, a patient needs to be diagnosed by a doctor with a terminal illness that doctor believes that patient has 6 months or less to live. Of course, some patients live longer than 6 months, and then there are some patients who live less than 6 months. It totally depends on each patient. Everyone is different. Everyone's story is different. One will pass when the time is right. I've had some patients who exceeded the 6 months, and some people even get removed from hospice because their condition has probably improved, or they just no longer have that end of life criteria, so they get removed from hospice. So just because someone is placed on hospice does not mean that they definitely have 6 months and less to live. I started hospice as an LVN. I played many roles. I was a field nurse, I was an on-call nurse, I was an office nurse doing QA, also did some marketing. What got me into hospice was that I was going back to school for my RN, so I did hospice because it was more flexibility for my schedule. My first RN job was hospice. I called back the company that I worked for as an LVN. I felt that it was a good idea to work with them only because they were so understanding with my scheduling and school. It was just like a payback for me just because they were really good to me. So as the RN in hospice, you are a case manager. Being a case manager in hospice, you have your own patient list, you have your own patient load, and then you just have your own team. So I would be the RN, and then I would have an LVN, and then I would have a home health aide, and we would work and coordinate together for patient care. I feel to be a hospice nurse, you really need a special type of compassion. You are literally witnessing months, weeks, days, hours, seconds even before someone's death. Like, you really see them transition. You build relationships with these patients, with their families. It's a really different type of rapport connection with these patients and their families. Hospice is not physically hard. It wasn't a real physical demanding job, at least for me. What was hard about being a hospice nurse was the emotional aspect of it. You are dealing with death. You are dealing with people dying. You are seeing loved ones watching their loved one pass away. It really does take a toll. I say that you need compassion, especially when being a hospice nurse, because I've seen nurses who don't have compassion. I've seen one nurse kind of smirk and giggle when a patient was literally on their last second of life while the patient's family was grieving. I feel that's really disrespectful, very unprofessional. Did she think this was funny that someone was dying and the family was grieving? I was on the other side of the room, and I'm trying to hold back my tears just because I am a crybaby. I cry about every single little thing. Sometimes I cry with my patient. So for me to see another nurse, a hospice nurse, giggle or smirk during that time, it made me angry, and I told the nurse to leave. But anyways, like I was saying, hospice nursing is very emotionally draining. You could be visiting a patient, and then an hour later you could receive a text or a message or a call from their family or your office that patient that you just visited has passed away. There was a time where I was visiting, this patient was already transitioning. I did my visit, I was leaving, I was about to start my car, and the daughter called me and said my dad passed. So I went ahead and, went back to the house and did what I have to do. You're there to also comfort the family. You're there to be an emotional support for them. It's just a really rewarding experience helping families cope with the death. You are there, they vent to you, they cry to you, they talk to you. Especially if you have that special connection with the family, it really is rewarding. I've been to patients' viewings, their funerals, patients' families' birthday parties after they passed away. Like, I really did bond with these families. I will post some of the texts that families sent me during the time their loved one passed, so you could just see what I meant regarding the relationships and the bond that we had. What I also love about hospice is, I mentioned it before, was scheduling. I was able to schedule around the errands. Sometimes I would visit 2 patients here and then go to Target and then finish, the rest of my patients. I would take my kids to school and then I would start visiting, and then I will do my errands for the day. I could do groceries, bring it back home, and then go do another visit. So the flexibility of visiting, I loved. Of course, there were times when you had to visit a patient. Say like a patient had an antibiotic at 2 p.m. Then of course you would have to be there at 2 p.m. But usually you're able to just schedule your own time of visits, and that's what I loved about hospice. Now, what I hated about hospice, believe it or not, I hate driving.
I hate it. I just hate it.
I don't like to drive, but of course, being a hospice nurse, what do? You drive. Because you're driving so much, there's more wear and tear in your car. Some companies, they will offer you like mileage or car allowance. My hospice did not give car allowance, they did give mileage. I also didn't care for being on call. I liked my routine visits, I liked my routine schedule, because I knew what I was going to do that day. For the hospice company that I worked for, we would be on call for 8 hours, and that 8 hours usually will be after hours. So if there were any emergencies, if there were any hospice evaluations, if there's any death, if there's any admission, if there was not an admission nurse, then you would do those visits. Didn't really care for them, especially when it was dark. I really hate driving in the dark and in the rain, so didn't care for that. However, when my check comes and I see the on-call rate and then all those extra visits, I was like, okay, this ain't that bad. But if I could avoid being on call, then I would avoid being on call. Another thing I didn't like about hospice was some people were just very inappropriate. There were times that I would have to tell the office that maybe you guys should send a guy there because it wouldn't really be safe for a female to go there. With that being said, always be aware of your surroundings. You are going to someone's home. They are familiar with it. They know what's in there. They know who's in there. You are going in there blindsided. You are trusting that these people are good, that they will do no harm. So just make sure that your guard is always up. Even in their neighborhoods where you park, people across the street, I would recommend you to have like pepper spray, just something to keep you safe, especially in this day and age. Like, you can never be too careful. Of course, our patient is important and we need to take care of them and make sure that your safety is number one at all times. Another thing I didn't really like is that my trunk was not my trunk. Diapers, pull-ups, their briefs, and there were different sizes. There was small, medium, large, extra large. There were wipes, there were the bed pads, the chucks, there were lotions, peri sprays, wound care supplies, saline, there's gauze, there's tape. I didn't really have my trunk. It was already filled with all my supplies. The thing I hated about hospice was the charting. However, as a nurse, you know that charting is important, documentation is important. You always need a chart. You need to chart every single thing that you did, because if you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. Even if you do it, but you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. So make sure you chart. You need a chart to save your own behind, because you never know when you get questioned. You don't know if you go to court. So just make sure you chart, because you worked hard for your license. You do not want to lose your license for something petty. So just make sure you chart. what I would do is I would find a show that I liked and I would chart while I watched, and then I would have like a snack with me. It made the charting more bearable for me. If I'm just gonna chart, I'm gonna be like, I'll be annoyed, I'll be irritated, I'll be like, oh my god, this is so much. However, if I had like the TV on or like music playing, it helped me cope with it better. But for sure I needed like something to munch on, so it could be candies, it could be chips, whatever. I had to eat something while I was charting. Would I be a hospice nurse again? Absolutely. I would be a hospice nurse again. Not for children, I'll keep the children in the hospital, but for hospice, I could be with adults, that's fine. I would love to be a hospice nurse again. Maybe later down the road, I would really go back to that avenue just because I felt it was really rewarding. So yeah, this video was more of my experience and how I dealt with hospice. I will be doing another video on hospice, getting more into the details of hospice. So if you have any questions on hospice, make sure to comment down below so I can try my best to answer them. If you have any experience in hospice and you want to share, go ahead and comment that below as well. Please don't forget to like this video, share, subscribe to my channel, click on that notification bell so that you can be alerted the next time I post another video. Okay, take care. Bye guys.